Shalom, shalom, family. Bringing another video uh, to you because I want to take another look at what I've been discussing uh, in a previous video. In a previous video, I talked about how Dr. Michael Brown uh, did indeed, in using the Safaria um, app application to talk about or to read Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. And there was a part in there which a guy by the name of Brother Tim disagreed with. And he only disagreed with Dr. Michael Brown because Brother Tim, it's obvious that he does not or has not studied Hebrew grammar to confidently say that Dr. Michael Brown's translation of a certain part of Deuteronomy 28, verse 68 is incorrect. And, he kind of laughed Michael Brown off. And I'm in no way an advocate for Michael Brown, but the truth is the truth when it comes to translation. And if you're reading Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, from the King James Version, and you in no way have any experience in studying Hebrew grammar, let alone reading a Hebrew text, you can't really argue with someone who knows Hebrew. And so, just to kind of show you what Michael Brown read, let me go to what is this right here? Let me go to it and I'll show you what he read that made this gentleman so pissed. And we go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. And in verse 68, it's this portion here that got him so upset, where it says, well, we'll read the whole thing. And Yahuwah will send you back to Egypt in galleys, and a galley is just a skinny or a narrow ship, which this is a terrible translation, but a ship is a ship. So if they want to use galley here, they're only using galley here to try to defend their position that the transatlantic slave trade didn't happen, because you can't fit a million people or a bunch of people at the numbers that they had in a narrow, skinny ship. So that's why they use galley here. But the appropriate term is ships, because that's what the Hebrew word means. But anyway, he says, Yahuwah will send you back to Egypt in galleys by a route or the way which I told you you should not see again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies. And that's the part that got Brother Tim pissed off, because he believes that the King James Version and how it's stated in the King James Version is correct, where it says, this is the part right here, right here. And there you shall be sold to your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen. Well, in Safaria, it says you shall offer yourselves, which I disagree with offer. It should be sell. And this is the word in question here. And what Brother Tim doesn't know is that this is the hifpael verbal stem, and then it has a plural suffix at the end. So in order to understand, or in order to know how to translate the meaning of the verb makar, which mem, kaf, and rash, which is m, q or k, and r, which makes up the Hebrew verb makar. The hip pa'el is determined or recognized by the hey and the tav prefix to the verb. So this Hebrew letter here is H, and this Hebrew letter here is T. And if this is prefixed to a verb, you know that this verb is in the hith pa'el stem. And I can show you. We click on the actual verb, and then you go here. It's abbreviated here, and it shows you the same type of verb used in a few other places. And in these other places, it also says either you sold yourself or thou shalt sell yourself. And you see right here, it means sell oneself as a slave. And so the translation here is correct. That's just here, because when you get about right here, it is incorrect. It is incorrect. But that's not the topic that what I want to show you in this video. What I want to show you in this video is something that I came across that is very interesting. And so most of the time when Egypt is the English translation for Mitzrayim, it's translated as Egypt. But yesterday when I did the video about Dr. Brown and Brother Tim, going back and forth about Deuteronomy 28, I just decided to hone in on the word, the noun Mitzrayim, which is used for the Egyptians. Moses used it. Now, what I did discover, which is very interesting, is that when Moses uses the word, obviously he uses the word throughout his writings. He uses the word throughout his writings. And there's a specific reason why he does that. But in Genesis chapter 10 in particular, I decided to do a little bit more research. And so not only do I look at the Hebrew text, I look at the Septuagint text, because I wanted to see how faithful the Yahudim priests who translated, the 70 Yahudim priests who translated the Hebrew text into what is called the LXX Septuagint, are they faithful with the name? Because we know that the term Egypt comes from the Greek term Egypton, or Egypt in Greek. And so when I look at the Septuagint here, I see that for the most part, the Yahudim priests in Alexandria who translated the Hebrew text into the Septuagint does transliterate the noun Mitzrayim in Greek by using the Greek letters. So it's Mitzrayim or Misraim, because in Greek there is no letter that gives you the TZ sound. So they use a S, a sigma. But then I started to look at other places, and they are not faithful with that. So if we look here in Deuteronomy 28, as well as a bunch of other places, in Deuteronomy 28, when they translate Deuteronomy 28 for Mitzraim, they don't transliterate it. They use the Greek word Egypton, which is this is the accusative form. But if you want the actual root is Egyptos. Okay. And so, and let's see, just so that, yeah, it's Egyptos. So we know that that's the term Egypt in Greek. But instead of you using Mitzrayim like they did here, they use Egypton and or Egyptos or Egyptine, depending on the case in the Greek language, whether it's accusative or nominative or dative. So they use the the word, the term that we are normally used to hearing. But then that made me key in on something else, because not only do they use, and I'm gonna go ahead and close this, not only do they do that in Deuteronomy 28, they transliterate Mitzrayim in Genesis 10, but in Genesis chapter 12, when Abram went down to Egypt, now this is Mitzrama is Mitzrayim, but it's the feminine form of the noun. And so, but what I want to show you is that here's Abram here in Greek, and this is Egypton in Greek. So they don't transliterate it, they give you the Greek version of the name. Now, here's the important thing that you need to get out of this. Moses uses the term Mitzrayim throughout the 5 books to describe the Egyptians, right? The Yahudim priests in Alexandria, they transliterate the term that Moses used, Mitzrayim, to Misraim in Greek in Genesis chapter 10, but everywhere else, I couldn't find any other place where they transliterate Mitzrayim. In the Septuagint, they use the term Egypton. And so it's got my wheels turning, because there's a few things that I do understand about Moses. And the first thing I understand about Moses is that though Moses is a Hebrew, he was adopted by Nubian people who conquered the Hyksos sometime between 1530 BCE. And these black Nubian Egyptians, for a lack of better terms, adopted Moses. Okay, so Moses was a royal in the royal family. And so I went over here and I typed in what positions were the Pharaoh's family, were the Pharaoh family royals, in. And so we know by and Egyptologists, black Egyptologists know that Pharaoh was considered the religious leader over what the Greeks who the Greeks called the Egyptians. He was the religious leader. And so his wife, the great wife, because Pharaoh had many wives. The great wife was the chief consort, and she held a significant political and religious influence position, um, as she supported her husband, the Pharaoh. The other wives, including foreign wives, uh, were lower ranking Egyptian women. So they were lower in rank, but they were still a part of Pharaoh's governmental administration. Now, the princes and the princesses, which Moses would find himself, because he was he was adopted by the daughter of Pharaoh, one of the princesses, because that the Pharaoh at that time did have two daughters. One died. Um, it says they were expected to be respectful and all of that, but they also engaged in administrative roles, held priesthoods, and occasionally represented the Pharaoh. Well, when it says that they held priesthoods, I understood what Stephen was talking about when he said this. In Acts 7:22, it says Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and in deeds. Well, him being mighty in words and in deeds is talking about a religious function that they held, that the priests held. And so Stephen is, out of all this history that he talks about, in one little small portion, he decides by the Spirit of God, because he was full of the Spirit when he began preaching this. And let me show you. Let's see. We have to go. Let's go over one book, because the context starts down here. Yes, and Stephen, full of faith and power, did great miracles among the people, uh, and then he was, he had people who wanted to argue with him about the things that he had did, and they weren't able to, because they couldn't resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spake. And so he's speaking all the way through chapter 6 into 7. And he's still speaking in the spirit when he makes this statement here. That tells me that God found this to be of major importance for us to understand about Moses. And so Moses, the reason why I bring this up is that Moses, being a royal to a Nubian pharaoh, being adopted in a Nubian family, Moses understood what the true name of the Egyptian were. It wasn't Egypt, and it wasn't Mitzraim, even though Moses uses the term. And I'm gonna talk on that here in a second. But Moses knows that this area of the Nile is called Kemet. It's called Kemet. So Moses knows that. But yet Moses uses a term that does not describe, really, according to the Kemetic people of this time, it doesn't describe them according to their opinion of themselves. Moses terms them Mitzraim. That's what he does. Now you have to understand that when Moses is writing Genesis chapter 12 and all this history, Moses is writing all this history, but he's not using the term Kemet when it comes to the Greeks' term of the people, Egypt. Moses is not doing that, and he's using the term Mitzraim at God's direction. And so, why would he use that term? That's when I started to do a little digging on the term. And anyone who knows Hebrew grammar, and you can look this up for yourself if you do not know Hebrew grammar, there's a certain way that a word is spelled when the word is dual in nature. Dual, dual in nature. Dual means I have two hands. That's dual. Two eyes. That's dual. 2 feet. That's dual. Two places that look alike or that are named the same. That's dual. I don't know if we have any one of any such a place in the earth that's named the same. Don't really care if we do, but the point is that Hebrew has a certain spelling where the term is the verb or the noun can be in the dual form. And it just so happens that Mitzrayim is dual in its form. It is that way because of the extension that is placed at the end of the noun. And let me show you. All right. Where am I? Mitzrayim is right here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go here. So the noun is mitzar. That's the noun. But the ending of it is the yod, the mem, and then you have the vowel pointings. Now, the vowel pointings, obviously, those were made by the Masoretes to preserve the pronunciation of words and also to preserve the meaning of a word, because Hebrew doesn't have any vowels, that it doesn't have any indicator that a vowel is a vowel except for a few letters, only a few. And it just so happens that those few letters, consonants that can double as a vowel is yod, hey, and vav, which is also the tetragrammaton, which is the name of God. So when a word is in the dual form, and let me go here and I'll show you that it's dual. So Mitzraim is dual of the term mitzar or matzar. All right. And we can see this term not only used in the dual, but also used in the plural form. Okay. And so the dual form of this Hebrew word that is given to the Kemetic people has a meaning. It has a meaning. And that meaning is found in this word here, matzar, matzor. And you can find that word used in its plural sense in Lamentations. And in Lamentations, Hamsarim is is translated as the straits here. But as you can see, it's the word Matzar. It looks like Mitzraim, but it's not, because if you know Hebrew grammar and you understand the vowel pointings, you know that for in the dual form, you have the lower or the small a, and then and here you have the what is this? I forget what the name of the vowel is, but it's not important. It looks like a period, looks like a dot, and the yod and the m, that lets you know that it is plural in its form. But if you take that away, you have matzar. Now, what does matzar mean? King James translated as straits, but that's not the meaning of the term. The word is mitzar, and it means distress. Distress. And the root of Mitzraim, Mitzar, or Matzor comes from that was the female, comes from this root word sar, which means distress, trouble, affliction, adversary. Any one of you use any one of these terms. So Mitzraim is dual in form, and it's really talking about places of distress. Places of distress. And this is what I mean about when people are translating the Hebrew text and they don't know what Moses is attempting to convey, or in fact even hide. And Moses is indeed hiding what he means here, because he lets us know in Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 that he had already spoken to the Israelites that came out of so-called Egypt after the Exodus. Deuteronomy is after Exodus. Moses says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. And you know, we can work on the translation there, and I'm definitely working on it. But if we truly translate the noun, because it's not Egypt, that's what the Greeks gave us. And really, that's what the Yahudim priests gave us, because they are using a term that the Greeks would know in their time, even though they transliterated Mitzrayim in Genesis chapter 10. And there's a reason for that I'm not going to discuss here. But if we translate Mitzrayim, the term that Moses used for the people who placed the Egyptians in bondage, the Nubian kings, the Nubian royals who placed the Israelites in bondage, or the sons of Jacob in bondage, I would translate this portion, and Yahuwah will bring thee into places of distress. And Moses is not really focused on the Egypt that they came from at this particular time. Moses is focused on dual, because that's why he used the term Mitzraim. And he's focused on dual because he's talking about two different type of captivities. Captivity is a place of distress. Nobody feels happy in captivity when you have to go through hard bondage and things like that. And so, or affliction, however you want to term it, nobody is happy about that. Moses knows what he's doing by using the term mitzar and making it dual, which is why we have Mitzraim. And Moses is pointing to the fact that there are two different captivities. And that's why he uses the dual form of this word. Remember, dual means two hands, two eyes, 2 feet, 2 knees, 2 elbows, 2 arms. Dual is anything in the number of 2. 2. That's what dual means. And Moses is referring to 2 type of captivities here by using the term mitzar and placing it in a dual form, Mitzraim. And so the first captivity is the one that many of the archaeologists now are identifying on the tombs in current day Egypt, the Greek name that was given down to us in history, that was passed down to us in history. But there's a second one. That's why Moses uses the dual form of the verb mitzar. And so the second one is the one that describes the 400 years, because the first one, they were not in bondage for 400 years. And let me show you one more thing before I close out. Let me go to the term affliction. Oh, shoot. That's not it. Affliction. All right. And I want to say I should have wrote this down. I really should have. I think it's here. I think it's here. Yeah. Okay. Now, I bring this up because when people go to Genesis chapter 15, and let me go there. Let me just go there for the sake of showing you, because I'm just going to end this whole debate right here. And 15 right here. Okay. Genesis 15 and 13 through 14. God prophesies to Abram about his seed, right? And this is not just a prophet prophesying. This is God himself telling Abram what is going to happen to his seed. But I want you to notice a couple of things. The first thing I want you to notice is this. Let me read it first, and then I'll tell you. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterwards shall they come out with great substance. Now, when those who want to disprove Hebrew Israelites, and the Hebrew Israelite belief that they are or our descendants that were taken captive in America, um, uh, are the true descendants of the sons of Jacob. They try to use this where it says they shall afflict them 400 years. They try to use this to mean that the affliction started with Isaac when Ishmael made fun of Isaac. And that's about the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. No one feels afflicted when they are being made fun of. Come on, you can't be that stupid. And so I bring up Deuteronomy 26 because this is what Moses writes in Deuteronomy 26 about that same prophecy. Now, it says in 26:5, and thou shalt speak and say before Yahuwah thy God, a Syrian ready to perish was my father. Now, here when it says Syrian, it's talking about Aram, and Aram is in the area by the Black Sea where Haran is. So it talking about Abram right here. That's who they're talking about. And he went down into Egypt, Mitzraim. Let's take a look at it. And he went down into Egypt. Mitz. Now, this right here, interesting enough, it is in a dual form. Okay. Mitzraim, and sojourned there with a few, and became there a nation great, mighty, and populous. And the Egyptians, Mitzraim, all right, evil entreated us and afflicted us and laid upon us hard bondage. This is the same term, they are describing themselves as that seed. They're describing themselves as that seed in Genesis 15. Now, they're only doing that because only some of this prophecy is fitting them. Not all of the prophecy, because they were not afflicted for 400 years. The affliction started when the Pharaoh who did not know Moses or did not know Joseph began to kill off the babies. Let's go there. Let's go into Exodus. This is when the affliction started. It didn't start with Isaac. Probably spelled that wrong too. Exodus. Didn't start with Isaac. It started with Jacob's sons. And let's read it out. Now, these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls. So we know 70 souls went down into Egypt when Joseph was there. Joseph was the only Hebrew there in his time that comes from Abraham, or I should say that comes from Jacob. Only 70 souls, not a million people that you have archaeologists describing in Avaris. 70 souls. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Now, this new king was the Nubian king that overthrew the Hyksos. And that happened in 1530 BC. Moses is his name. And he said, Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities of Pithom and Ramesses. Now, these are not the actual names of the cities. These cities were built on top of the cities that is being described here. This is just an update from whatever scribe updated the last scroll that we have. So Ramesses sits on top of Avaris. Do your research. The archaeologists have already explained this. But the more they afflicted them, so you see again, they are in affliction. They are in affliction. The more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Now, the new king arose in 1530 BC after he conquered the Hyksos. The Exodus happened in 1426, I believe it is, or 1446. That's hardly coming close to 400 years. So they were not in affliction for 400 years, and they were not in the bondage for 400 years, but they went through similar characteristics of the same type of activity that God describes in the prophecy. And let's read that again. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, in a land that is not theirs. That's key. Stranger in a land that is not theirs. So the sons of Jacob, when that new king arose, they were in a land that were not theirs. Their land is what God given to Abram, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Okay? And shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. This is the important part. Affliction for 400 years. Now, God does not give anyone the name of the land, even though he know who the Egyptians are, because in Genesis chapter 12, Abram went down into Egypt. Abram even knows who the Egyptians are. If we're going to use the Greek term, Abram knows who the Kemetic people are because he went down. He lied to Pharaoh about Sarah. So Abram knows who the Pharaoh is in Genesis chapter 12 when he went down because of a famine that he experienced in his time. And he came out with a decent amount of treasures because of his half-truth about who Sarah was. So Abraham knows, but God does not say that the nation would be Egypt. If he did, then the second time they go back into Egypt, it would have to be the physical place. But remember what I told you. Moses named the Kemetic people Mitzraim, which is a dual form of the Hebrew word or Hebrew noun mitzar, which means distress or besiege or trouble or affliction, however you want to term it. He is talking about two types of affliction because it's dual. Like my hands are dual, they're two. My elbows are dual, it's two. My feet, my eyes are dual, my ears are dual because it's two, and I can only have two. That's why it's called dual and not plural. And so when Moses is telling them in Deuteronomy 28, he's talking to a people who had already experienced some of Genesis chapter 15, but they did not experience all of Genesis chapter 15. So now you have to think to yourself with your midget brain, who went through affliction for 400 years in a land that is not theirs. I'll let your midget